Growing water crisis in Corpus Christi that could soon have big consequences far beyond the coastal bend. Without significant rainfall in the future here, officials are warning that that city could face a water emergency within months.
A Texas city of 500,000 people is now just weeks away from running completely dry. Two reservoirs that have reliably supplied Corpus Christi for generations have dropped to less than 10% capacity, while water restrictions bite harder on residents than on industry. How did a city with such a vast water footprint allow its supply to collapse so catastrophically? Behind the drought lies a tangled story of political choices, industrial demands, and environmental strain that has left a once thriving community balancing on the edge of catastrophe. Reservoirs near total collapse. Corpus Christi's water story begins with two reservoirs that once symbolized abundance: Lake Corpus Christi and Choke Canyon Reservoir. Today, both lakes hover below 10% of their total capacity. The combined system that has quenched the city's thirst for generations is now barely a tenth full. For a city of roughly 500,000 people, this is not just a drought. It's a looming crisis that touches every faucet and fire hydrant in the area. The reservoirs are rapidly draining, with no rainfall on the horizon to pause the decline or reverse the trajectory. Lake Corpus Christi currently holds around 9% of its water capacity, and Choke Canyon sits even lower at about 8%. With such alarming numbers, city officials have acknowledged that the city could run out of water within as little as 60 days. This countdown is made public every Tuesday by City Manager Peter Zanoni, who cautiously avoids declaring an official water emergency that would force harsh industrial cutbacks. Instead, the city teeters on the edge, trying to balance economic concerns with an unfolding humanitarian need. The dwindling water levels have triggered stringent water restrictions for residential users. Citizens face fines as steep as $500 for watering their lawns, car washing, or any non-essential water use. Despite these restrictions, the stark reality is that these efforts barely touch the overall consumption picture. The reservoir's drop is not solely due to lack of rain or residential use. Something far more complex is at play. This deepens the story, revealing that the crisis was not only caused by nature, but by a series of intertwined human decisions. A civil engineer assigned to the emergency well field reports sleepless nights filled with grim calculations, highlighting the severity of the situation. The challenge isn't just conservation. It's an intricate battle involving supply, demand, and legal agreements that shape the city's water future. The emergency wells being drilled today are a last-ditch attempt to stretch resources as far as possible, but they are no cure. With the clock ticking, the city's water future has become a central question for community survival. The severity of the reservoir collapse is compounded by historical context. These two bodies of water have served the coastal bend for decades, supporting households, businesses, and industries alike. The rapid drop in capacity reflects an accelerated depletion unlike anything residents have experienced before. The once dependable water lifeline seems stretched to a breaking point, forcing everyone to reckon with an unprecedented scarcity. The physical decline of the reservoirs foreshadows deeper systemic issues that will be outlined later. City officials' weekly updates underscore the precariousness not just of supply, but of managing expectations, especially as industry remains largely untouched by restrictions. The reservoir collapse isn't just a physical phenomenon, it's a reflection of political, economic, and social dynamics converging to push the city to the brink. This silent crisis has simmered for years, with each dry month siphoning away a little more hope. For now, the visible truth is the disappearing water, an unignorable sign of a system failing before our eyes. The reservoir's collapse is further complicated by climate trends. More than 60% of Texas is currently classified under severe drought, or worse. The Nueces River, which feeds both Lake Corpus Christi and Choke Canyon Reservoir, is straining under scarce rainfall. While the reservoirs drain alarmingly low, one startling fact stands out. The majority of the remaining water doesn't go to households, but to industrial giants, whose thirst shows no sign of slowing. Industry's water consumption. In Corpus Christi's water crisis, a striking imbalance reveals itself. Over 60% of the city's remaining water supply is consumed by heavy industry. Oil refineries, petrochemical plants, and steel mills collectively drink far more water than all the residents combined. This isn't a minor share, it's the lion's portion of a shrinking resource. 6 major industrial users alone have put back nearly 57 billion gallons of water over the last 3 years, more than 3 times the total residential use in the same time frame. This scale of consumption by industry is astonishing when compared to the water restrictions placed on ordinary citizens. Families face strict limits, hefty fines, and severe conservation demands, all while these industrial plants operate with comparatively little curtailment. The city's own water usage dashboard confirms this imbalance, showing that even during drought-driven Stage 3 restrictions, industrial water use actually increased between 2022 and 2025. Far from cutting back, these corporate users maintained or expanded their operations, further straining the reservoirs. The cost disparity only adds to the picture. Industrial users pay a fraction of what residents do. For every 1,000 gallons, the plants pay just 31 cents. This discounted rate, combined with legal exemptions from drought restrictions, effectively insulates them from the urgency felt by everyday residents. While households tighten belts and face fines for water-saving measures, heavy industry continues drawing millions of gallons with little financial or regulatory pressure. One of the most significant water allocations goes to Gulf Coast Growth Ventures, a $10 billion plastics manufacturing complex jointly owned by ExxonMobil and SABIC, the Saudi state-owned chemical company. When the plant came online in late 2021, it began consuming substantial water volumes even before its industrial output fully ramped up. This large-scale consumption is emblematic of the broader industrial footprint on Corpus Christi's dwindling water supply. The imbalance has led to growing public frustration and tense debates over water justice. Residents see the stark contrast between the scarcity imposed on them and the seeming freedom enjoyed by industrial users. This inequity fuels social tensions and questions about who truly controls the city's most precious resource. It also highlights systemic issues in water governance and resource prioritization. Even with the drought getting worse, the steady industrial demand keeps coming up, which kind of makes you wonder about how sustainable this is long run. It looks like that water use doesn't really slow down even as supplies run lower, and that alone is feeding worries that the city's reservoirs could get drained in record time. Environmental groups plus people from the community say if industrial usage stays unchecked, then residential needs and ecological requirements are going to get pushed out completely. That situation basically forces a real reckoning about where economic activity ends and basic human needs begin. Right now, the city's limits and regulations lean toward protecting industry, at least partly because it's viewed as economically important. Officials seem hesitant to demand major cuts, especially ones that could stall or slow operations. They worry about jobs and tax revenue. Because of that, residents are kind of left in the middle of a tightening squeeze, being told to conserve while industry's demands still get legal protection. Behind the numbers of industrial consumption lies a political story, one where unanimous city council decisions set the stage for what would become a water supply disaster. Political decisions and water allocation. Corpus Christi's water tragedy is inseparable from a series of political decisions that prioritized industrial growth over sustainable resource management. In 2021, the City Council voted unanimously, 9-0, to allocate a significant portion of municipal water rights to Gulf Coast Growth Ventures, a massive $10 billion petrochemical complex. This vote happened before the plant had even begun operations, committing a large share of the city's finite water supply to industrial use in perpetuity. Warnings about the insufficiency of water to support this allocation were on the record. Former Councilman Jim Klein publicly cautioned that the city simply did not have enough water to spare for such a venture. Despite these concerns, the City Council proceeded, effectively signing away critical drinking water before fully understanding the consequences. This decision laid a foundation for the crisis that has since unfolded. With the plant coming online in late 2021, alongside the opening of a major steel mill by Steel Dynamics, the demand on the reservoirs intensified rapidly. Each new industrial consumer further depleted water that might have otherwise supported residential needs or environmental recovery efforts. The overlap of these major projects strained an already fragile system, pushing the reservoirs toward collapse. The political landscape during this period was influenced by outside interests. During the 2023 and 2024 election cycles, a political action committee known as the Coastal Bend Coalition spent around $250,000 backing candidates for the city council. This PAC branded itself as responsible governance, but advocated fiercely for policies favoring industrial water access. The slate it supported won seats, reinforcing water as commodity thinking in local government. This political capture has kind of reshaped the whole discourse about water rights, like shifting the local story toward seeing water mainly as an economic asset instead of a public resource. Councilman Roland Barrera, who was part of the post-capture leadership, put it out there in a rough way. Water is a commodity. And that general mindset has then guided policy decisions that push back on restrictions for industrial use, while residential users are stuck with painful cutbacks. Meanwhile, trying to build alternative water solutions has been stalled or outright rejected under a kind of pressure from politics. In September of 2025, the City Council voted down a proposed desalination plant, saying the costs kept climbing from hundreds of millions up to more than $1 billion. Critics, including Texas Governor Greg Abbott, said the council was wasting a needed lifeline. Still, the political unwillingness to take on costly infrastructure remains pretty stubborn. And the council's resistance doesn't stop there. Even emergency measures are treated like they can wait, with a delay around declaring official water emergencies. If they declared a Level 1 emergency, industrial users would have to reduce their intake, but officials repeatedly postponed that move to shield local economic interests. That reluctance pretty clearly shows the tightrope decision-makers are walking, trading short-term jobs and revenue against longer-term sustainability, or at least trying to weigh both and failing to agree. Overall, this water supply crisis has become a mirror of political priorities, ones that tend to favor industry and influential backers over community welfare. The choices made in council chambers end up affecting every resident's ability to access clean water, sooner or later. The political environment has basically turned water management into a high-stakes contest, not only about water, but about power and influence as well. As political decisions channeled water to industry, the consequences for residents grew harsher, deepening social divides and sparking restrictions that add urgent human dimensions to the crisis. Impact on residents and restrictions. As Corpus Christi's water dwindles, residents find themselves living under increasingly severe restrictions that affect everyday life in profound ways. Watering lawns is banned outright, and those caught breaking the rules face fines reaching $500. The city has enforced Stage 3 water restrictions for years now, meaning simple acts like washing cars or filling pools have become offenses, underscoring the austerity felt in homes across the city. Families have had to adjust routines dramatically, conserving wherever possible, from boiling eggs in small batches to saving cooled water for plants. The scarcity touches the most personal parts of daily life. Despite these sacrifices, residents watch as industrial water consumption continues unabated. While families ration and face penalties, crucial industrial players remain largely exempt from drought restrictions. This glaring disparity feeds frustration and breeds a sense of injustice. Communities feel the sting of this uneven burden, as industries seemingly drink with impunity while households must endure hardship. The contrast between legal exemptions for industrial users and stiff penalties for citizens reveals a fracture in the social contract around shared resources. This unequal distribution fuels a growing movement among citizens seeking water justice and fair treatment. Community leaders like Isabel Araiza, who founded the Coalition for the Greater Good, are pushing for a fair water amendment to be placed on the November 2026 ballot. This measure aims to end the exemption industrial users currently enjoy from drought surcharges and restrictions. Advocates see the amendment as a pathway to rebalance water rights and hold major consumers accountable. The struggle for this change illustrates the grassroots demand for equity amid crisis. For families in neighborhoods like Hillcrest, The water crisis intersects with a painful history of environmental neglect and social displacement. Hillcrest, a historically black community, has been surrounded and slowly eroded by industrial expansion over decades. Residents endure not only water scarcity, but also the dragon smoke from cooling towers, a constant reminder of the industrial forces reshaping their environment and lives. As homes vanish and streets disappear, the community's connection to place feels increasingly fragile. Water shortages compound this sense of loss, intensifying the challenges Hillcrest's residents face. The tightening restrictions have also, somehow, amplified economic disparities more than people talk about. Many lower-income households don't really have the means or the slack to install water-saving appliances or to adapt quickly to rationing. The cost of fines and the limited resources hit hardest in these communities, especially when budgets are already thin. Meanwhile, wealthier households and industrial interests continue operations with fewer constraints and even fewer repercussions. That dynamic ends up reinforcing systemic inequities. So the water crisis, in practice, magnifies class divisions. It ties environmental strain to economic hardship, like they're linked with the same rope. Alongside the domestic struggles, the emotional toll weighs heavily. People speak candidly about sleepless nights and anxiety over an uncertain future, and it's not just in their heads. The daily reminders of scarcity, no washing, no sprinkling, no overuse, function like constant stressors. The psychological burden resonates deeply, and it piles on top of the practical difficulties day after day. In homes across the city, the water shortage isn't only about a resource running out, it's about hope drying up too. City officials recognize the public pressure, but they remain cautious about enforcing restrictions in a selective way. The reluctance to impose mandatory cuts on industry reflects worries about economic fallout and job losses. Still, that hesitancy widens the gap between who is asked to sacrifice and who gets a kind of leeway. Residents take in these realities with growing skepticism, and they demand accountability from decision-makers. The struggle is no longer just about water. It's about fairness in governance, plain and simple. The struggles faced by residents cannot be understood without considering the larger environmental and social context, where drought, industrial expansion, and historic community displacement form intertwined layers shaping the crisis. Environmental and social layers. The water crisis in Corpus Christi is not just a matter of supply and demand. It is rooted in 5 intertwined environmental and social layers that shape the city's present and future. First, the broader watershed faces unprecedented strain. Over 60% of Texas is currently experiencing severe drought, or worse, and the Nueces River, which feeds the reservoirs, is starving. With no meaningful rainfall on the horizon, the natural inflow to Lake Corpus Christi and Choke Canyon is critically low. This environmental context is the foundation upon which all else rests. The second layer is industrial demand, which relentlessly drains the reservoirs regardless of drought severity. As previously noted, oil, petrochemical, and steel sectors consume more than 60% of the water, making them the city's largest water drinkers. This industrial thirst does not wane with restrictions or drought stages, pushing the ecosystem to its limits. The demand far exceeds what the river and reservoirs can sustainably supply, escalating environmental degradation. A third dimension is political capture, which has shifted water policy to favor commodity and profit over public good. The support and funding from groups like the Coastal Bend Coalition during election cycles have inserted pro-industry voices into key city council positions. This political realignment has reinforced a worldview treating water as a tradable asset rather than a communal resource. It influences every decision about allocations, restrictions, and infrastructure, often to the detriment of residents and the ecosystem. Fourth, the crisis deepens long-standing social and racial inequalities, exemplified by Hillcrest, a historically black neighborhood bordering the industrial corridor. Founded in 1944, Hillcrest was once a thriving community until industries began buying out homes, erasing streets, and shrinking its physical footprint. The dragon smoke of cooling towers hangs over the neighborhood, a symbol of environmental injustice and displacement. Residents like Mona Little describe their community as reduced to a location, a pot of gold for industrial interests, rather than a home. The fifth and final layer reflects the failure of last resort solutions. The desalination plant, hailed as a potential lifeline, was voted down in 2025 amid skyrocketing costs and environmental concerns over marine life damage due to brine discharge. The project's price ballooned from a few $100 million to over $1 billion, further complicating financing and timelines. As a result, emergency measures like drilling wells and leasing groundwater rights serve only as temporary bandages, unable to offset the deeper systemic problems. John Michael, the civil engineer leading these emergency well drilling efforts, voices stark frustration. He warns that diversifying water sources with groundwater should have happened 2 decades ago, preventing the current crisis. Now, he works late into the night, negotiating state permits and hoping to buy time. The band-aid nature of these efforts underscores the scale of the challenge facing Corpus Christi. Meanwhile, environmental degradation continues. Reduced river flow affects aquatic ecosystems and bay health, threatening marine species and water quality. The combined effects of drought and industrial extraction place long-term sustainability in jeopardy. The environment that once supported a thriving community and economy now suffers under multiple, compounding pressures. Amid these overlapping challenges, attempts at solutions have faltered, leaving Corpus Christi searching for ways to bridge short-term fixes with future resilience. Failed solutions and delayed infrastructure. As Corpus Christi's reservoirs shrivel, the city's attempts at long-term solutions have faltered, leaving residents exposed to a precarious water future. A major desalination plant, once hailed as a potential lifeline, was voted down in September of 2025. The project's cost had ballooned from an initial few £100 million to over $1 billion, fueled by rising construction expenses and financing complexities. Environmental concerns about brine discharge, threatening marine ecosystems in the bay, also weighed heavily in the decision. The combination of cost and environmental risk made for a politically and socially fraught choice. City officials and boosters had hoped the desalination project would provide a reliable, drought-proof alternative to traditional freshwater sources. But as prices soared, skepticism grew over the project's feasibility and affordability. The council's rejection deepened fears that Corpus Christi might run out of options, especially as the urgent need for new supply collided with fiscal realities. Critics, including Texas Governor Greg Abbott, publicly condemned the city council for squandering a vital chance to secure water, heightening tensions between state and local leaders. In the absence of the desalination plant, emergency measures have taken center stage. The city's civil engineer, John Michael, supervises a last-ditch effort to tap into groundwater supplies by drilling emergency wells along the Nueces River. These private wells and emergency state permits offer temporary relief but do little to address the broader systemic shortfall. John Michael calls this approach a band-aid, a stopgap that cannot replace comprehensive planning and infrastructure investment. The prolonged delay in diversifying water sources has left Corpus Christi vulnerable. Experts agree that the city should have begun groundwater diversification decades ago to mitigate this exact crisis. Instead, years of deferment combined with growing industrial demand have pushed the reservoirs toward collapse. The emergency wells aim only to buy time, yet they highlight the failure to plan ahead for inevitable drought and growth pressures. Meanwhile, the community watches pretty anxiously as officials scramble to handle the crisis with only limited tools available. Households conserve aggressively, but somehow industries push back against mandatory reductions, and meanwhile the environmental quality declines. With timely infrastructure investment missing, everything feels even more urgent, and it kind of underlines what happens when you postpone difficult decisions. That precarious balance starts to strain trust between residents and leadership almost right away. Also, the rejection of the desalination plant kind of shows how environmental considerations complicate solutions that seem straightforward. Brine sent back into the bays can devastate aquatic life, which upsets fragile ecosystems that sustain local fisheries and biodiversity. These environmental stakes make even projects that are technically feasible feel contentious, and it blends ecological preservation with human survival concerns, not just one side. The push and pull between protecting the bay and securing water points to those layered challenges of resource management that are hard to untangle. As the search for solutions flounders, a deeper story unfolds about the political forces shaping water policy and the interests that drive resource allocation in Corpus Christi. Political influence and industry power. Political power in Corpus Christi plays a decisive role in determining who gets to use water and who must sacrifice. The 2023 to 2024 election cycle saw a political action committee named the Coastal Bend Coalition invest roughly £250,000 in city council races. Branding itself as a voice for responsible governance, the coalition backed candidates who supported industrial water interests. This slate of candidates largely secured victory, further embedding water management policies that prioritize industry over residential needs. This political capture has profoundly shifted the landscape, reframing water as a commodity to be bought, sold, and protected for economic growth. Councilman Roland Barrera eloquently summarized this worldview in 5 stark words: water is a commodity. This perspective underlies many legislative and administrative decisions, shaping allocation, exemptions, and enforcement. It effectively elevates corporate water users above community and environmental priorities. The influence of industry-backed candidates restricts the city's willingness to enforce reductions on large water consumers, even in the face of severe drought. Officials express reluctance to confront these powerful interests directly, citing potential economic fallout, job losses, and impacts to tax revenues. This creates a de facto tiered system of water use where residential users bear most of the burden while industry continues operations with minimal constraints. Lobbying efforts and campaign contributions extend this influence beyond elections, weaving a web of ongoing pressure that shapes policy debates. Industry groups maintain a strong voice in public discourse and City Hall, often framing water conservation debates around economic necessity rather than environmental or social justice. This dynamic further entrenches policymaking that favors industrial water users. The political environment complicates public efforts to implement water reforms or new infrastructure projects. Proposals like the desalination plant faced resistance not only for cost and environmental reasons, but because they threatened established interests and power balances. As a result, political considerations frequently override technical or ethical discussions about water fairness and sustainability. The structural imbalance in political power also exacerbates social inequities. Industrial water consumption, backed by politically influential corporations, contrasts sharply with the restricted access and rising costs borne by residents, especially in historically marginalized communities. Water policy becomes a mirror, reflecting broader disparities in representation and influence within Corpus Christi. Community coalitions and activists seeking change encounter an uphill battle against this well-funded and organized political machinery. Efforts like the Fair Water Amendment, aiming to end industrial exemptions from drought surcharges, face a challenging path against entrenched interests. These grassroots campaigns highlight the ongoing tension between citizens' demands for equity and the political realities of power. While political power shapes much of the landscape, the looming threat of an official emergency declaration and community responses hint at an uncertain future, fraught with difficult decisions. The future uncertain. Corpus Christi stands today on the edge of a defining crisis, with a formal Level 1 emergency looming just months away. This declaration would force industrial water users to cut back, but local leaders have hesitated, prioritizing the city's economy over immediate restrictions. The tension between protecting jobs and preserving essential water supplies creates a dangerous balancing act. As the reservoirs continue to drop, time is shrinking, and each delay narrows the options available to the city. Even as the emergency approaches, heavy industry has shown little willingness to voluntarily reduce consumption. Bob Paulson, who runs a local industry group, has publicly stated that refineries will not shut down voluntarily, even if a Level 1 emergency is declared. This posture underscores the sharp divide between industrial priorities and community survival. Without voluntary cooperation or regulatory compulsion, the pressure on water supplies will only intensify. The city's water dashboard reveals a sobering trend. Industrial water use increased during the most severe drought period, even as residents faced escalating restrictions. While families conserve and face fines, corporations continue to draw millions of gallons. This imbalance pressures local activism and political movements to demand change, but entrenched interests and legal exemptions make progress difficult. The status quo favors industry, leaving residents struggling for a share of their own water. November 2026 brings a pretty big moment. The Fair Water Amendment is going to the ballot. It's being spearheaded by community organizers like Isabel Araiza, and the goal is to end industrial drought surcharge exemptions, also to push for more equitable ways of using water. The whole campaign feels like a grassroots effort that is trying to rewrite the rules, because those rules have long tilted toward corporate consumption over residents' actual needs. If it passes, it could end up being a turning point in Corpus Christi's water crisis and maybe even bring new accountability, or at least a start of it. Still though, despite the hopeful tone, a lot of threads are left hanging. The desalination project, which had been shelved for a while, has come back quietly, but now with a higher price tag and a longer runway of time. That situation points to the same old problem. Getting durable solutions isn't straightforward when political pressure, financial realities, and environmental hurdles all stack up at once. The city has to maneuver through a tangle of competing demands, and there's really no single answer sitting there waiting. Regionally, Corpus Christi is not standing alone. Towns nearby like Three Rivers, Alice, and Beeville are also watching their water sources thin out. In the Nueces River Basin, the stress levels are at a level people didn't expect. So many communities are drilling new wells in a desperate kind of scramble to keep taps flowing. This broader scarcity isn't just local. It signals a drought crisis that's touching multiple parts of Texas, and it raises questions about how water management works statewide. Like, what else is being missed? Corpus Christi's water crisis is a stark warning about what happens when political choices, industrial power, and environmental strain collide. A city once thriving faces unprecedented scarcity, with hard decisions still ahead. If you found this story important, please like and subscribe to stay informed on critical issues shaping our world.